500 years ago, a disgraced Florentine official wrote a single sentence that still makes people uncomfortable today. He said it is safer for a leader to be feared than to be loved. Most people hear that and recoil. It sounds cold. It sounds cruel. It sounds like the philosophy of a tyrant. But Machiavelli was not describing how he wished the world worked. He was describing how it actually does. And if you have ever been put in charge of anything, a team, a project, a family, a single difficult person, you have already felt the truth hiding inside that sentence. Today, we are going to look at what Machiavelli really meant, why he was more right than we want to admit, and the one mistake that turns his advice from wisdom into ruin.
Niccolò Machiavelli was not a king. He was a civil servant who spent his life watching the powerful rise and fall. He saw princes betrayed by the very people who once cheered for them. He watched rulers who were generous, kind, and beloved lose everything in a single season. And out of all that observation came his most famous book, The Prince, written for leaders who wanted to keep what they had built. In it, he asks a simple question: is it better to be loved or to be feared? And his answer is careful. Machiavelli wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, when one of the two must be lacking." Notice that phrase, when one of the two must be lacking. He is not saying don't be loved. He is saying that when you can't have both, love is the one you can afford to lose. Fear is the one you cannot. Why? Because of how people actually behave under pressure. Here is his reasoning, and it is sharper than it first appears. Machiavelli observed that love is something other people grant you at their own convenience. They love you when it costs them nothing. But the moment loyalty becomes expensive, the moment standing by you means losing something, that love evaporates. He wrote that men are less hesitant about harming someone who makes himself loved than one who makes himself feared. For love is held together by a chain of obligation which, since men are wretched creatures, is broken on every occasion in which their own interests are concerned. Read that slowly, because it is the whole argument. Love is a chain of obligation, and obligation is the first thing people drop when the situation turns against them. Fear, on the other hand, does not depend on anyone's mood. It does not need them to like you on a hard day. Now, before you decide this is just cynicism, think about your own life. Think about the boss everyone adored. Relaxed, friendly, never wanted to be the bad guy. What happened in that team when deadlines slipped? When one person stopped pulling their weight? Usually, nothing. Because the well-loved leader could not bring himself to create a consequence. And without consequences, the people doing the real work quietly burn out, while the people coasting learn that nothing is required of them. Being loved felt good, but it failed the very people it was supposed to protect. Now think about the other kind of leader. Not cruel, not loud, just clear. The kind of person where you knew, without a doubt, that if you crossed a line there would be a result. Strangely, those are often the leaders people respect most years later. Not because they were harsh, but because they were predictable. You knew where you stood. That is what Machiavelli is actually pointing at. Fear, in his sense, is not terror. It is the certainty of consequence. This is the part modern readers miss. When Machiavelli says feared, he does not mean a leader who screams, threatens, and humiliates. He means a leader whose word carries weight, whose yes means yes, and whose no means no. A leader you do not want to disappoint, because disappointing them actually means something. That is closer to gravity than to violence. But here is where Machiavelli draws a line that almost everyone forgets, and it is the most important part of the entire idea. He says you must be feared, but you must never be hated. He wrote that a wise leader should make himself feared in such a way that, if he does not gain love, he at any rate avoids hatred. For being feared and not hated go very well together. Feared and not hated go very well together. That single distinction separates a respected leader from a doomed one. So how do you stay on the right side of that line? Machiavelli is specific. He says the leader who is feared but not hated keeps his hands off two things: the property and the dignity of his people. In his words, a prince must abstain from the property of his citizens, because men more quickly forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony.
It is a brutal observation, but look around. People will tolerate almost anything before they tolerate being robbed or being humiliated. Translate that into your world. You can hold people to a high standard. You can deliver hard consequences. You can be the leader nobody wants to let down. But the moment you take credit for their work, mock them in front of others, or punish them unfairly, you cross from feared into hated. And hatred is the one thing Machiavelli warns will destroy you. Because the feared leader is obeyed. The hated leader is sabotaged, undermined, and eventually overthrown by the same people who smile at him every morning. So the real lesson is not make people afraid of you. The real lesson is this: build your authority on something that does not depend on being liked. Be consistent. Be fair. Be someone whose standards are real and whose consequences actually arrive. Let people know exactly where the lines are. And then, within those lines, treat them with respect so complete that they have no reason to hate you. Let's make this concrete. Imagine two managers. The first wants to be everyone's friend. He approves every request, forgives every missed deadline, and avoids every hard conversation. For a while, the team loves him. Then the cracks show. The reliable people start carrying the slackers. Resentment builds. Eventually, the best people leave, not because the manager was harsh, but because he was weak. His need to be loved made the whole system unfair. The second manager is warmer than she looks, but absolutely firm. She praises good work openly and addresses bad work privately and immediately. Nobody doubts that she will follow through. At first, she seems intimidating, but over time, something interesting happens. People trust her. They know her word holds. They know effort gets recognized and failure gets addressed. She is, in Machiavelli's exact sense, feared and not hated. And her team becomes the one everyone wants to join. Which leader would you rather work for? More importantly, which one are you? Because this is not only about managing others. It is about the authority you hold over your own life. Think about the promises you make to yourself. If breaking them carries no consequence, you will break them every time your interests change, exactly as Machiavelli said. The version of you that respects your own deadlines, that follows through whether or not you feel like it, that treats your own word as binding, that version is, in a sense, a little feared by the rest of you. And that is what makes you reliable to yourself. There is a deeper truth underneath all of this. Machiavelli understood something uncomfortable about human nature. That admiration alone is not a foundation. People can adore you and still abandon you. They can applaud you and still let you fall. If your entire position rests on being liked, you are standing on the most unstable ground there is, other people's feelings on a good day. But respect built on consistency, on consequence, on the certainty that you mean what you say, that survives the bad days. That is the ground Machiavelli tells you to stand on. So the question he leaves us with is not really, should I be feared or loved? It is something harder. Are you willing to be disliked in the moment in order to be respected over time? Are you willing to deliver the consequence that the well-liked leader avoids? Are you willing to hold a line, knowing some people will resent it, while making sure you never give them a real reason to hate you? That is the discipline behind the most misunderstood sentence in political philosophy. Not cruelty, not manipulation, just the courage to let your authority rest on something stronger than approval. Machiavelli wrote for princes, but the dilemma is yours every single day, in every room where you are responsible for an outcome. Choose to be the leader whose word has weight. Be clear, be fair, be impossible to hate and impossible to ignore. And you will have learned the lesson that 5 centuries have not managed to wear away. Machiavelli had a living example in mind when he wrote all this. He had watched Cesare Borgia, a ruler he both feared and admired, take control of a lawless, chaotic region called the Romagna. The territory had been ruled by weak, indulgent lords who let crime and disorder run wild. Lords who wanted to be liked and so enforced nothing. Borgia did the opposite. He installed a hard, decisive man to impose order, and order arrived fast. The region became peaceful and unified. But here is the masterstroke Machiavelli admired. Once the harsh work was done, Borgia knew the people now resented the cruelty of his enforcer. So he had the man publicly punished, leaving the population, in Machiavelli's words, at once satisfied and stupefied. Borgia understood the line precisely. He was feared enough to create order, but he refused to be hated for the cruelty that built it. He gave the hatred somewhere else to go.
You don't have a province to govern, but the principle scales to any room you lead. The weak lords of the Romagna are the manager who avoids every hard conversation and lets the team rot in comfortable disorder. The lesson is not to be cruel like the enforcer. It is to understand that order requires consequence, and that the leader who refuses to provide any consequence is not kind. He is simply absent. People do not thrive in the absence of standards. They drift, they resent each other, and the strong quietly carry the weak until they leave. So when you feel the pull to avoid the hard call because you want to stay liked, remember what Machiavelli saw 500 years ago. The beloved, consequence-free leader does not create harmony. He creates a vacuum, and something always rushes in to fill it, usually the worst behavior in the room. If this gave you a new way to think about authority and respect, you will want to see where this leads next. Watch our breakdown of Machiavelli's idea of fortune and skill, what you actually control and what you don't. And if you want more timeless wisdom that helps you lead a stronger, clearer life, subscribe to Above Average. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.